Hello, everyone. I am Ajit Prabhu, the co-founder and CEO of Quest Global. Welcome to Quest Global Horizons. Today, we are exploring sustainable transportation solutions with Danny Di Perna, my guest, who is a executive VP and chief operating officer of Alstom. We will be discussing the evolution of sustainable transport, the technological innovations, some of the adoption challenges, and urban planning impacts and global initiatives shaping our future mobility.
Thank you, Ajit. Thanks for the introduction. It's a pleasure to see you and a pleasure to be with you today.
So, my first question to you is, having worked in both these industries, aerospace as well as the rail industries, which are both responsible for transporting people from A to B. So billions of people are transported every day across the world, and these products that are out there are safe, reliable, and making a difference to the humanity. So my first question to you is, having worked in both these industries, what is different and what is same between the aerospace and rail industry?
Well, it's an excellent way to kick off and start. I would say the first thing I would say straight to you as an answer on what is similar is two words: higher purpose. Both of these transportation means and modes have a single higher purpose for safe, efficient, and effective passenger experience, passenger transportation. And I would say to you, Ajit, and thank you very much for the kind words at the very beginning of the intro. You're right. I've spent a lifetime, I would like to say, at Pratt & Whitney. My second love is Pratt & Whitney. I'll let you figure out the first love later. But I would say to you that for sure, I took the jet engine and aviation world for granted in terms of technological advancement, technological complexity, systems integration, everything that I thought was, other than flying to the moon or to Jupiter, there is nothing harder, sexier, more technologically challenging than designing jet engines for airspace and for aircraft and in aerospace. I was wrong. I really do want to tell you I was wrong. I underestimated when I was asked to lead the transportation business for Bombardier Rail and now with Alstom. I very frequently say that I completely underestimated the technological advancements, the system integration, the complexity, including the sophistication of design and engineering to make sure that everybody that is on a very high-speed train at 350 kilometers an hour or on regional trains at 160 kilometers an hour start their journey and end their journey safely. So in terms of similarity, I would say higher purpose. I would say in terms of difference, and then I'll go back to you, I'd say carbon footprint. Part of what you want to talk a bit about today, I would think, is sustainability in rail. And I'd say that's one area where transport is roughly 27% of the overall global emissions in terms of carbon footprint emitted to the atmosphere, for which rail is a very, very small percent. It's roughly about 3%. So I would say one difference. Of course, there's many other differences. I haven't seen a train fly yet. That would be different. But in terms of apropos for today's discussion, Ajit, I would say the ability to be closer to a perfect green world. We're much closer in railway systems than we are today in aviation. Let me leave it like that and go back to you.
That's great. So from your standpoint, just specific to the rail, what are some of the technological development that you say are crucial for advancing the sustainable rail?
Well, I would say that, first and foremost, if I go in a little bit of order, first of all, there are a tremendous amount of legacy fleets out there that are diesel operated. So, as gas turbine engines burn kerosene, legacy railway systems, of which there is an enormous installed base, burn diesel fuel. Locomotives pulling Also, electrification, which we'll get into, depending on the source of the electricity, that also comes with a carbon footprint as well. In my home province that I was born in, Quebec, hydropower is ultimately very clean. Whereas today, India, as an example, is way up there in electrification, but the source of the electricity, I still think, comes predominantly from burning coal. So a bit of a different view in terms of global footprint and contribution to carbon. But I would say to you that, number one, what do we have as an alternative to diesel? So your question about technology, first and foremost, in a full electrified world, if the electricity overhead or below on the third rail is green, then we have electric motors, and we are, by definition, not emitting any carbon. I would say that where we have alternatives is hydrogen, hydrogen fuel cells, and of course, 100% battery automated train system. So that's technology number one, I would say. The other technology that doesn't get always, it's the invisible. And I'd like to venture into that, Ajit. There's the visible and there's the invisible. When you see the physical train, you board the train and it's a pleasant experience for the passenger. You're in the visible. You know it's being pulled. You see the tracks. Everything's visible. The invisible is the digital technology. And what I've come to learn in the railway systems, as a bit of opposed to aerospace, I would say, is the digital system that keeps everybody safe in terms of signaling systems. And in signaling systems, there's a lot more that can be done technologically to push for ETCS level 2, level 3 systems for signaling, so that we could go trans-border. In Europe, for example, many of the countries have their own homologation process. We're working together with the authorities to be able to cross borders. That's another technological advancement from a signaling perspective. The other thing is driverless capability and automation. We have many systems today around the world that are in operation that are driverless. It's not threatening the drivers. More and more and more, it's getting harder to find drivers for these sophisticated vehicles. In the future, you could tell that with driverless capability, we certainly are pushing that technology and being able to be at the forefront from that area. One last thing I would say is resilience. Technologies that are aimed and targeted for a more resilient system, whether it be crosswinds that can affect and provide you a cross force while you're rolling on the tracks at very high speeds, which would then institute a bit of a deceleration and a slower speed of operation, which then, of course, consumes more electricity. It also extends the journey time, but also designs for a higher temperature climate. So having more efficient HVAC systems for passenger comfort when you're operating in Saudi, when you're operating in India, when you're operating in Egypt. And finally, materials, lighter materials, more energy efficient electronics like silicon carbide that don't consume as much electrical power. I would put all of that. I know it's multiple aspects of technology, but Ajit, they're all important and they're all in their own way being funded and pushed, not only by Alstom, but by the industry.
Yeah, definitely. As you articulated, the differences between the aerospace, the aero jet engines, as well as the rail, systems. Oftentimes, in engineering, it is a multifaceted problems that we end up solving. And more you get to know an industry, more you realize how complicated machineries are and all the different challenges. So if you were to zoom in just specifically on decarbonizing, right, the strategies that rail companies can adopt to reduce the carbon footprint and transition to cleaner energy sources, how do you see the businesses are all evolving?
Well, I think twofold. If I may, I'll start inward and then move outward with my answer. For sure, we need to walk the talk. So our factories, our sites, our maintenance depots, we have an effort for sure to be more energy efficient, consume less electricity, the electricity that we do use with green certificates, ensuring that we are getting the most green available in the city, in the country, to provide power to our factories so that we can produce these wonderful train systems. That's part of, running the operation in a green, responsible, climate-friendly way. Of course, installing solar panels. We have something that we're doing now in Spain, where we have a new solar power production facility in Spain. We're using with Schneider Electric as our partner. Just as an example, legit, we're executing 160 gigawatt per year solar power purchase agreement in southern Spain, Andalusia. By the way, if you haven't been to Andalusia, Jit, it's fantastic. I went biking there for a week. I loved it. So we should go there. That would be a green way to pedal through a beautiful countryside. I digress. But back to your point, starting inward, we're doing what we can. The LED lighting systems. And you would be, some of our factories are almost 200 years old. So it's not a throwaway comment that says that our 477 factories and depots around the world at Alstom need to be greenified within the footprint that we control. After that, I mentioned the green certificates that provide us electricity to make sure that we have a green thread coming into the facilities. The next thing is expanding across the value chain, the design of our train systems, which I kind of mentioned a bit earlier before, but we are spending an enormous amount of R&D, engineering, and innovation to lower the electrical consumption. I mentioned silicon carbide. There are other weight measures. If you take out less weight, you need less energy to move the train at equivalent speed. So we're looking at all of those, and we are investing in those areas. We're investing very heavily in battery. We're investing very heavily in hydrogen, fuel cell. In fact, we are the first company to have both hydrogen fuel cells and BEMUs, battery electric multiple unit coaches in service today for passengers. So we're doing our fair share on the technology inside. And the last aspect of it, if I go full throttle, is we're focused on scope 3 for our supply chain. And in our supply chain, we have tools that we've put in place to help our suppliers respond back to us on how they are producing their parts, their carbon footprint. So we're working together with them. There's not a punishment, but we are trying to ensure that who we buy from around the world, first and foremost, ethics, compliance, follow the standard rules for partnering with companies around the world. But from a green perspective, we're now trying to measure when we buy, are we buying from the greenest possible making source or partner in the future? So that's kind of the way I would answer you in 3 tranches, Ajit.
Okay. No, that's great. That's great. Now, switching a little bit to enabling the green rail transport, right? Sustainable transport. I think the electrification of the rail lines is an important factor. So, what percentage of the rail lines in Europe versus America, or maybe in Asia, have the ability to be electrified so that the green agenda can be progressed?
Well, very relevant and you may remember, Ajit, when we were together in India, you had asked me to speak a little bit about sustainability in rail systems. And if you recall, I had presented some information at the time about electrification. So first, before I rattle off just some percentages, which I have handy here with me, I came prepared for this podcast, Ajit. I didn't want to disappoint you whatsoever. I would say if I just give you a little bit of an overview, we've mentioned already the importance of electrification. For us, that's what's most important. A country, a city, anything that has clean or the cleanest possible electricity that can be applied to our electric motors and through a catenary system above the roof or below in a third rail, by far that would be the best. There's a lot of talk, Ajit, about biofuels and the importance of biofuels. For us, we don't burn carbohydrates. We don't hydrocarbons, sorry, but you can move the H and the C anyway. But we don't burn fuels. We're not internal combustion engine experts. Those are other companies that that burn fuel. So for us, just pure electric current, coulombs coming into our motors, that's all we need. And if it comes from a green source, great. Now you ask about the world's endeavors in electrification. Let me start in your home country of India. From India's electrification over the last 5 years is enormously been growing. It went from roughly 40%. In fact, 2.5 years ago, I reported to you, sir, roughly 37 to 40% electrification. Since then, all new lines are going in electric, and India is climbing above 90%. The trick there is, where does the electricity come from? And if the electricity is coming from largely burning coal and coal burning factories, then it's not the full answer. Let's leave it at that. Europe, I would say Europe is roughly around greater than 55% electrified. Of course, more to go, more capital investment for electricity and electrified lines. But certainly Europe, by far, I would say, the leaders in rail as a continent. Mode of transportation is far easiest, in my humble opinion. When you travel any of the countries in Europe, rail is always my first choice, including the Paris to London route, my favorite. I'd say that in the United States, by contrast, less than 1%. Canada, less than 1%. So you could see China over 60%. So you would see, Ajit, that the world is got different ways of progressing in terms of rail. But that would be the statistics I would tell you. And each of them come with their challenges. India, very high electrification for railway lines, but the source of the electricity, not so good. In the US, it's an enormous multi-billion, if not trillions of investment to electrify a giant country that really has been built on highways for automotive and trucks.
Yeah. So no, this is great. I think, like, while a lot of rail infrastructure is developing, a lot more electrification is taking place. The alternate energy sources, obviously a lot of OEMs are thinking about how to develop green energy, cleaner sources, and how to provide that energy in a much more efficient way to the consumers. So that, while that is being addressed, I also wanted to ask you a question about how is this sustainable rail is reshaping the urban development? What policies are driving this change across different continents?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you asked, Ajit, because I wanted to go there. I really wanted to talk to you a little bit about the mega trends or macro trend in terms of what's driving it, and then get into a little bit of the challenges that we see from a rail perspective. But number one, just to throw around a little bit of data, if you don't mind. The current population on the planet is roughly 8.2 billion, give or take. Half, I was shocked to read that slightly more than half, 4.4 billion people live in what we call cities. Of course, in each country, the definition of a city, a town, a burb is a bit different. But at the end of the day, half the population of the earth lives in cities. 80% of the gross domestic product, the GDP, is generated by people working in cities. It does not mean that we don't need farmland, we don't need agriculture, we don't need forms of clean, green mining. It doesn't say that. But the facts are, half the people live in cities. So, to your point about sustainable change, and what's reshaping urban development, number one, they forecast by 2050 that, I don't believe it, but that 80% of the population, which is roughly around 10 billion at the time, will live in cities. Honestly, Ajit, you and me will have to live in the country, because if 8 billion people live in cities, oh my gosh, who's living in the rest of the 90% of the world? Forests, oceans, streams. So I don't know if I believe it all. I guess I might not be here to see it all, but let's see what happens. But number one, I would say there's a incredible shift of people to the cities. The next point is, I would say that about your sustainable rail reshaping, number one, traffic. So traffic congestion, you can see already in some cities, including London, where I know it for fact, they're putting a bit of a tax for cars moving into the city. In other words, trying to promote a modal shift to rail transport. And again, legit, as I said, 27% of the pie chart is all transportation means, and really only 3% of that 27% is rail carbon dioxide emissions. So we're already about as green as you possibly can get, with several caveats. Doesn't mean we can't be more. So the trick is, how do we get more people to love riding trains? More governments to invest billions into the infrastructure that's really required for people like you and me to hop on a train city to city to city, very lower hassle. You don't have to be hours ahead of time like we do at the airports. So the whole thing is so much easier. How do we get more people there? So I would say, number one, reduction of traffic congestion. Number two, the passenger experience. Number three, evidence shows that when you build accessible lines that are in the suburbs, moving in and out of large major cities, New York, Bangalore, Delhi, Paris, London, if you can quickly move people regionally in and out, then you can start to increase the suburban development.
Yeah.
The value of the homes and the properties go up. For example, in London, I have a love for the Elizabeth line. I've spent a fortune of effort trying to help that line. But there's 180,000 new dwellings per kilometer of Elizabeth line. So in other words, when you make accessible, nice, clean, wonderful passenger experience, enabling you to go in and out of the city for work, then I think you get the best of both worlds. You promote the GDP by bringing your brain into the city, but then you boot out and live in the suburbs so that you can distribute the population and not have super centered 50 million people per city.
Yeah. So I live in Weston in Connecticut. It's like an hour and a half from New York City. My daughters live in New York, but they commute by train. Okay. So, today my nephew had to go to New York City in the morning, and he had the option of either taking his car and traveling, or going to a Westport station and then take a train.
Guess and he chose the train, I hope.
Absolutely.
That's what it did. Choose the train. Choose the train. Well, he was wonderful. We should give him a gift.
Yeah, well, I think I see that in a lot of the people who live in the suburb area, they do exactly that. So they take a morning train and then go and come back. Obviously, more the train systems allows the people to work efficiently inside. More they are connected. More I think the chances increase for people to take the train more than their road transport.
If I could interrupt you for 1 second, Ajit. So first of all, I wholeheartedly agree. When I do Paris to London, those 2.5 hours, they're quiet, they're calm. I get tons of work done. The Wi-Fi doesn't always work. I understand why. Sometimes you're under the channel. Sometimes it does. Sometimes it doesn't. Very interesting. I was in Italy 3 weeks ago. Audie and I were with my Italian colleagues. Were hosting a customer. I won't say who, just to leave it like that. And the customer came in. We spent 5 hours together. I really want to tell you, 24 minutes of the 5 hours was the CEO of the customer telling us that you really need to improve that Wi-Fi. I know you're implementing a new Wi-Fi system. It really needs to work. It's important. So it's interesting, Ajit, that you mentioned Wi-Fi. I was sitting there listening, and I took it for granted. Like, I'm saying, this is what the guy wants to talk about? Wi-Fi? Passenger experience? Working efficiently and effectively? If we don't enable it, people aren't going to use the train.
Okay. Unless you convert it into a meditation place, disconnected from the Wi-Fi, and everybody is like, get a space to be free of, connected to the digital world.
That's true.
And then,
well, it's funny you say that. When I fly to Singapore, I pray that the Wi-Fi doesn't work so that I could just read a book and think for a change. You're right. Today, it's too much digital, too much. There's too much social media. We're too connected. Okay, but that's another podcast. That's on humanity.
Yeah. Okay. Well, changing the subject a little bit to the supply chain side, how can rail companies work with suppliers to reduce the scope 3 emissions and improve overall sustainability.
Yeah, it goes back a little bit to what I was mentioning. I didn't complete my whole thought process there, but you're right. The way we've broken it up in scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, scope 3 is the value chain. We're looking, for us, we've got a target by the end of the decade, by 2030, to have 30% what we call scope 3 purchased goods and services reduction in measured to a standard carbon emission. So, we just recently in October, a while ago, we launched a procurement carbon tool. It's another form and system for our suppliers to partner with us. Of course, I say that pro and con. They now have to provide us information. So if Quest was manufacturing, as an example, legit, we would politely ask you to log in, tell us about your energy consumption, tell us about your energy source. So we're trying to do that. The reason why is not so that we can go report you to the feds or to the government, but it's for us to be wiser on who we buy from. In the future, we're going to have a choice. We may not want to buy a forging or a casting if you're burning energy from a dirty source. If you are moving towards green, we have a compliance program and an ethical commitment to the environment to buy from as green as possible sources. So I would say what we're doing is A, working with the suppliers to communicate our commitments. B, of course, in every jurisdiction, every country, especially with the Paris Agreement, with what the governments are pushing in terms of the overall green commitment. Of course, it's wavering a little bit these days. Nationalistic tendencies are taking over from more of a global view. But I would say collaborating with suppliers, telling our suppliers we have a choice. And if they move in the same direction, we can grow together. If they move opposite direction and all they want to do is burn coal, then, we'll find an alternative source. And if we don't, there is very little that Alstom couldn't do in our own factories. And if push came to shove, that's what we would do.
Well, generally, the sustainability burden is for everybody, right? So it is not linked to one industry, one country. It is a global problem. So net zero is a goal that we have all collectively have the responsibility to achieve end of the day. And of course, the rail industry contributes a small percentage to the overall problem. But regardless, it is a fact that rail industry has access to billions of customers, right? Your employee, the customers who come take the rail system. There are billions of people, are making use of the rail. So this infrastructure that you have, in your opinion, how rail companies can effectively engage all the stakeholders, including the clients, the employees, the communities, to promote sustainability?
Yeah, it's good. It's a good point. Of course, there's the public awareness that we're trying to, make everybody realize, as we do, that, rail is one of the only, real efficient and effective mass transportation. I say mass because it's important. Mass transportation, because I have an Audi e-tron. Right. And I'm sure you have you may have an electric car as well. So, okay, you could put 3-4 people in the car, but when a train is all electric, you can move 1,000 people, so you need to put a ton of cars on the road to be able to go point to point to the same efficiency. So continuing this famous buzzword of modal shift, continuing to work with our customers, many of our customers, 85% of our customers are public procurement entities, i.e. government agencies. So continuing to promote with our European Union, with our different government regulating agency and bodies around the world in the different countries, promoting rail is what we're trying to do. So, promote rail, get the public to be aware. Of course, we have our own work to do as well, Ajit. We need to provide reliable green mobility solutions. Not all of our technology works perfectly out of the box. And I'd like to come back to that at the very end of this discussion about the appetite and patience. So if you could trigger me on appetite and patience for technological advancement, I'd like to make that comment. But But back to your point, the rail tracks, unlike aerospace, where it's the air molecules around the planet, the rail tracks are limited. Therefore, you have to either add more rail, which is quite an expensive endeavor. Just look at the two examples that immediately come to mind because I spent a lot of time in England. But HS2 is going to spend billions, tens and billions of pounds for the new very high-speed rail system. It's enacting now. Crossrail, which is a fabulous system, the Elizabeth line, which moves 4.8 to 5 million passengers a week through end-to-end London. It was almost 18 billion pounds to dig the tunnels, to pull the lines, to put all the signaling systems, to buy our wonderful, great Alstom trains. So it costs a tremendous amount of money. But back to the existing lines, you have both in some countries freight and passenger rail traffic on the same lines. Signaling system. I come back to the invisible. What we can do with the invisible is we could reduce the headway between freight and or passenger traffic. So same physical infrastructure. Could we move trains in higher frequency, shorter gap time called headway, and therefore instantly get 25 to 30% more capacity by using smart digital signaling systems to provide the safety system. So that's another way that we can continue to promote and to push for lower infrastructure investment, but get more capacity, i.e. enable more passengers to travel. And maybe, Ajit, if you want to go to that patient comment right now, appetite and patience.
Yeah.
The next thing is for us to continue to invest in hydrogen, for us to invest in battery-powered trains so that we are not requiring even electrification. That's the whole beauty, is where the cost of the infrastructure investment is so high because they don't already have, like in the US, electrification lines or electrical lines, catenary lines. Then let's promote hydrogen and battery power, because then you have to charge up at the station. You either fuel up your tank with hydrogen, you load up your battery and go. My point is, I think the world needs to be more tolerant to these technological advancements, stick with us and partner a little longer. There's teething problems at the beginning of these type of technological advancements. But I would say that some of the contractual terms and conditions are quite onerous. And when a new technology that is not so mature is punished, or the developer is punished very quickly for the shortcomings in that technology maturity, you know what? The business case will never hold water. And that is an obstacle to green, in my humble opinion.
So you're referring to the policy and regulations and expectations set on the OEMs to be moderated with keeping the longer term in mind, because all these technological evolutions, is an upgrade. It takes a lot more resources, a lot more getting that maturity, which will serve for the humanity on the longer term basis.
Yeah, absolutely. The point here is we need co-investment and partnership and not punishment for trying to break the frontiers because our planet is going through some hot times right now, and we all know the 1 degree to 2 degrees C can make a huge difference to the future of humanity on the planet. So to punish a company that is trying, and I don't just mean us, the industry, we just need to be more tolerant and more supportive. From a business perspective, Ajit, the margins are already razor thin. So when you go and invest in this technological advancement and we need to improve if everything is punishing, you know what? It's too hard. Let's just burn fuel. It's easier to burn fuel. Yeah. That's not what we want.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's a collective burden that we all have, the policymakers, to OEMs and the clients and the people, right? So all the stakeholders have to come together. That's the only way we shall address this problem. So thank you, Danny, for sharing these valuable insights today. where you touched upon the trends that are shaping the sustainable rail in the coming decades. Looks like based on this conversation, at least on the technological side, there are ways to answer the problem. So I think you talked about decarbonizing strategies. How can we develop energy efficient rail systems, electrification, alternate fuels, all of these things, and also you touched upon urbanization and how rail systems can provide answers to, including enhancing the GDP perhaps by connecting the suburbs to the cities, and as well as some of the things that the policymakers can do to enable adoption of the green initiatives. So thank you for your time, and I wish you all the very best at Alstom. You guys are shaping the world to make
Thank you. Keep
billions of
trying.
people move, and wish you all the very best.
Well,
Thank you.
thanks, Ajit, for your time, and thank you for offering me this opportunity to dialogue and discuss with you in today's podcast. I wish you a great day and a safe journey onward. I know you don't always stay in the great state of Connecticut, so safe journey wherever you go. Please use the train at least a few times on your next journey.
All right, I'll see you in.
And send me a picture of you on the train. That's the cost of this podcast.
With the Alstom logo in the back.
That would be even, if you just take a train, I'll accept it. If it's an Alstom train, I buy you dinner in London.
Alrighty, sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Ajit. Take care.
Bye.